Around 1919, at Johns Hopkins University, a baby not yet a year old sat on a mattress on the floor, reaching toward a small white rat placed in front of him. He didn't flinch, he didn't cry. He simply reached for it, curious in the way infants often are. Within weeks, that same baby was crying and trying to crawl away at the sight of the same rat. And not only the rat, a rabbit, a fur coat, a Santa mask with a soft white beard. Something had been built into him that hadn't been there before, fear where none had existed a few weeks earlier. The man behind this was John B. Watson, and by 1919 he'd already built a career on one forceful idea. Psychology, he argued, had spent too long obsessing over the mind's hidden inner life, feelings, introspection, consciousness. He wanted to throw all of that out and study only what could be observed directly, behavior, and he believed almost all human behavior, including our deepest fears, was learned, built through experience, not born into us. He had read about Ivan Pavlov's dogs, conditioned to salivate at the sound of a bell simply by pairing that bell, again and again, with food. Watson wondered if the same principle could explain something far more complex than salivation, something like fear itself. To test it, he needed a subject too young to have learned complicated fears of his own, someone close to a blank slate. He found one through a colleague at a campus hospital, an infant referred to in his published notes only as Albert B., son of a woman who worked there. By Watson's account, Albert was unusually calm, rarely startled, rarely upset, which made him, in Watson's eyes, close to ideal. First came a baseline. Albert was shown a series of ordinary things: a white rat, a rabbit, a dog, a monkey, masks, cotton wool, even burning newspaper, and by Watson's account, none of it frightened him. He reached for the rat the same way he reached for everything else, with curiosity, nothing more. But one thing did reliably scare him: a loud, sudden noise. When Watson and his assistant Rosalie Rayner struck a steel bar with a hammer just behind Albert's head, he startled and cried every time. Now they had their two pieces, something neutral, the rat, and something that reliably produced fear on its own, the noise. The plan was simple: pair them together again and again and see whether the fear would transfer. It did. Each time Albert reached for the rat, Rayner struck the bar. After only a handful of pairings, the rat alone, no noise at all, was enough to make him cry and try to crawl away. Watson believed he'd gotten exactly the result his theory predicted, and, by his account, the fear didn't stop at the rat. In the days that followed, he tested whether it would spread to similar things: a rabbit, a dog, a fur coat, cotton wool, even that Santa mask. Each time, Watson reported the same kind of distress. It's worth remembering that this record rests entirely on the observations of the two people running the experiment, with none of the independent verification a modern study would require. But the account they published described a fear that had spread outward from one rat to an entire category of soft, white, furry things. Some of this was filmed. The footage still exists. An infant reaching towards something with open curiosity, and then, minutes later, recoiling from it in visible distress. Watson published the results in 1920. It became one of the most cited studies in the history of psychology and one of the most criticized, both for what it claimed and for how it was done. Because here's the detail that separates this case from most others like it. Watson never reversed what he'd done. He wrote that he'd hoped to try methods for removing Albert's fear, to see if conditioning could be undone as deliberately as it had been built. But Albert's mother took him out of the hospital before that could happen. and the study simply ended there. A fear built and documented and never undone. For decades, little Albert was just a name in a textbook, a case study with no real identity behind it. That began to change when researchers started digging through hospital and genealogical records, trying to find out who Albert B. actually was. One team proposed a candidate, a boy who died young of an unrelated illness, which would complicate how his original reactions should even be read. A later team proposed someone else entirely, a boy who lived into old age and was remembered by family as having a lifelong wariness of animals. Neither identification has been fully settled, and it's worth being upfront about that. This part of the story is a live historical dispute, not a closed case. What isn't in dispute is the shape of what happened. An infant was deliberately conditioned into fear as a demonstration of a theory, and there's no reliable record that anyone ever tried to undo it or checked on him afterward. By today's standards, almost nothing about this study would be allowed. There was no real informed consent, no debriefing, no follow-up care. The entire modern framework around research ethics, especially research involving children, exists partly because of cases exactly like this one. And yet the idea at the center of it outlasted the ethics scandal. That fear isn't simply fixed at birth, but can, at least sometimes, be built through experience, before a child has any way to resist or even understand what's happening. It's a single case, and it shouldn't be mistaken for a universal law of how fear works, but it planted something that behavioral therapy would later build on directly. If fear could be conditioned in, researchers reasoned, maybe it could be conditioned back out. Exposure therapy and systematic desensitization, treatments used today to help people work through phobias, trace a line back to that basement in 1919, just running the process in reverse. Watson's own career ended a few years later, not over the ethics of the study, but over a personal scandal involving his affair with Rayner, which cost him his position at Johns Hopkins. He left academic psychology for advertising and spent the rest of his career applying the same principles of conditioned association to selling products, a strange coda for a man who'd spent his research life proving that feeling could be manufactured on command. What stays with you isn't really Watson's career, or even the unresolved question of exactly which child he studied. It's the footage, a baby reaching for something new, open and unafraid, and a few weeks later recoiling from it, having learned to be afraid through no choice of his own. We like to think fear is something we earn, built slowly through things that actually happen to us. Little Albert's case is a quiet reminder that it can also simply be handed to us, and once it's there, no one promises to take it back.